Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. So no Warhammer the Old World at the Adepticon Preview, and we knew that going into it. But what does this mean for Warhammer the Old World at the moment, and what else was there that might give us some clues, or may at least be useful to Warhammer the Old World players?
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems, and offer custom items to suit your club, your event, or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
Now, if, like me, you're forever online, be that on Facebook, in Discord groups, or watching videos like this about your favourite game system, and in this case the subject is Warhammer the Old World, when there isn't news for a period of time, quite often the rumblings of doom tend to emerge. And the smaller your game system in terms of support from Games Workshop, i.e. are you 40k or Age of Sigmar? If not, you fall into that smaller category. Sometimes those gaps of news go a little bit longer than it does for other game systems, but you get the same noises in all of those groups. And in some game communities, those periods of quiet and periods of unhappiness go a little bit longer than others. And if you're a fan of Middle Earth strategy battle game or Blood Bowl, even before the new edition, the periods of quiet were much bigger than we've had to endure at all as Warhammer the Old World fans. And we've had quite a lot of stuff in the last couple of years. But before we get down into the weeds and some thoughts on that, about how we react as a community, let's have a little look at what we did get in relation to Warhammer the Old World and what impact that might have, and is there anything there that we can use. Now, very obviously, it's a 40k heavy reveal, and that's probably part of the reason there isn't any Warhammer the Old World news here. We're going to be flooded with Warhammer 40,000 for the entire summer. There's a new edition on the way, which has been teased in this reveal, and there's something before that as well that kind of leads up to it, and that's pretty big in itself with Armageddon and Yarrick. And if you're an old fan of Warhammer 40k, those things might interest you, but I'm not going to cover any of that here, you'll be pleased to know. But we do have some Warhammer Age of Sigmar stuff that's been shown in that reveal, which may give us some clues or may have some useful elements. The thing that really stands out as most important are the clans Eshin, because we have more Skaven in Age of Sigmar, and there's new miniatures to that range. And I definitely, like many others, thought when they refreshed the range for the last edition, and Skaven were part of that, that most of that old range was then freed up for a return to Warhammer the Old World, but that didn't happen, as we know now. And the more stuff that we see for Skaven, some cool terrain there that might get some use maybe in Warhammer the Old World if you remove some of the Sigmar parts. But I'm interrupting myself. All this Skaven based stuff along with Cities of Sigmar would suggest to me that Skaven probably aren't going to land anytime soon in Warhammer the Old World. It's too much of a big thing in the Age of Sigmar IP and setting at the moment. But it doesn't mean we can't go and buy these miniatures and put them on square bases and use them in Warhammer the Old World. There's a legacy army list, which maybe isn't great if you're playing competitively. There's obviously a very recent update to that made by Independence. So Val at Square Base has done his own Renegades version of that. If you're playing competitively, you might be interested in that. I'm sure there'll be other community versions as well. But there's multiple ways of playing them, be that competitively or casually if you want Skaven, and I'm going to be working on Skaven this year. So I look at these miniatures and think they're stunning, and I'd love to have them in my armies. Does that make me feel a little bit scared about how long it might be before they get a chance to return? Then yes, it does. All of the Cities of Sigmar stuff is pretty cool looking as well. Some of it you absolutely could do some really cool conversions of, but every miniature that you could use like this one as a Priest of Sigmar, maybe there are lots that maybe you couldn't use as well, but there are some possibilities for conversions here, especially Renegade Crowns. So I think it's always positive to have official plastic miniatures if you want to buy them from Games Workshop that you can use in your stores. You can use a Warhammer World events as Empire if you want to at the moment, or Renegade Crowns at the moment, unless they change those rules. So I think there's positive stuff there. But like I've already alluded, I do think that means that the arrival of Skaven in Warhammer the Old World is probably even further off, and that's something that we may not see to a future edition, because there'll need to be enough time for the releases to move on to other things with Age of Sigmar. There's lots of rumours about Age of Sigmar in this past week about it having a big end times moment and a refresh. I don't think the game's going anywhere, but it might have a relaunch. Maybe at that time, the Skaven releases will be the older ones and they'll be looking at new things, and Old World team might get the nod and they might be able to bring back Skaven in some way or another. And out of all of the made up lore reasons for not having half the factions back, there's obviously lots of business reasons behind that. For all the made up lore reasons, Skaven having a civil war until the Great War Against Chaos is probably one of the most viable reasons they're not part of the main storyline. Obviously they are in the world and should be there and they should crop up, but for them to return as part of the Great War Against Chaos around that period, I'm not going to bang on about that too much. I did a video recently about thoughts around how the legacy factions could return. I'll pop a link into that there. Go and watch it if you've not seen it already. And there are, of course, other Cities of Sigmar stuff that's been announced. Again, these are wild. I don't think there's going to be an awful lot of use for these in Warhammer the Old World, though some amazing kit basher will find parts of these. Look at the bombards on there. You could buy one of these and maybe split up the parts, use the tower on a city wall as a bit of a building or something, use some of the miniatures, some of the platforms, some of the guns. Lots of parts would be great. I'm not sure about the big stompy legs, and I do think these are incredibly cool looking miniatures, just not the kind of fantasy I prefer, the kind of old world centric square based fantasy, but some genuinely really cool elements that you can use in again, Empire or Renegade Crown's armies to cut up and chop up. I can see bits here maybe being turned into a different style of balloon, maybe one that's run by Empire and you have in your Jade Fleet list. So there's elements there that you could pinch and make more of an Empire manned balloon, even though you're using it with the rules for Cathay. So I think there's loads of conversion elements there that would be really cool. And no doubt the other miniatures, but again, I think are stunning, will show up in armies. People will use them in Chaos armies. You've got your battle mages that could turn up to be outcast wizards or just mages in Empire armies as well. And, you know, it's a different kind of ogre with some conversions, get rid of some of the Sigmar shaped iconography, and maybe you can see them in Renegade Crown's armies with all of the use of ogres at the moment in the lore around the east, around Cathay as well. So I think there are some cool elements that can be lent into this miniature, just awesome as well. Alternative foot knights for Bretonnia or Empire, or veteran sellswords. Some of these are very normal looking armor if you get rid of, again, some of that iconography. It's amazing what changing out the shields and trimming off some of the little extra bits would do. I think there's lots and lots of grounds for using some of these miniatures in your old world armies, scale dependent of course. And with recent Cathay firearm developments, you've got miniatures here as well that could substitute if you didn't like them or wanted that kind of theme with more of a mercenary Cathayan army as well. And lots of kit bashing elements here that could be used. Just super fun if you love that kind of hobby. But the reason for showing that wasn't to show you, oh, this is still a good release for Warhammer the Old World, you just use these miniatures. That's not what I'm getting at all. I just think they're cool miniatures. The main point is this miniatures range is devolving more and more all the time from Warhammer the Old World, from old fantasy, and I think that's really good for Warhammer the Old World. Aside from Skaven, which is a shame that they're still stuck there looking very Skaven-like, which is dangerous for their future in Warhammer the Old World. When you look what's going on with Cities of Sigmar and how much that game is changing, big stompy towers that look like they're from War Machine rather than from the world of Warhammer. I think the connection with a tabletop and War Machine versus old square-based Warhammer is far closer to War Machine, and the way the game plays now, I think that's good for Old World. I think it separates the games even more, which I think shows the clear desire to separate those games. They are their own things now, apart from a few outliers. Dark Elves are disappearing from Cities of Sigmar. Unfortunately, they're leaving the witches with them in most cases, so we've got some problems there, but some of that could come back to Old World now. Skaven look a little bit stuck in Age of Sigmar now for sure, but other things don't, and the more those games split and diverge, the better it is for the old Warhammer identity to come back. We just have to hope amongst hope that in future editions Skaven and some of those other factions will come back, and I'm pretty sure they will. Money will always talk in the end, and things will always come back, because at some point Skaven returning to Warhammer the Old World will make sense. It will be a big release. The other part of this video is just to talk a little bit about the community reaction to this always. And I'm not here to tell anyone off. I'm just here to share the way I see the game and the way I hope most of the wider community sees the game, because any super positive thing or any super negative thing is always amplified online by the loudest people. And I'm being loud here. I'm here with a microphone putting a video out onto YouTube. I get there's a level of irony there as well, but just if you're reading those things online and you're reading the game is dead, that's it now, they're going to let it die stuff, just have a think. Look back at what's happened in the last 2.25 years since the launch of Warhammer the Old World. We've had 10 factions return for the game. 10, which is a huge amount. You would not normally see that kind of stuff in any game's release cycle aside from 40k really, and even that's pushing it a little bit. So there's a huge amount of work that's been done to bring all of those back, and I think that's really important to remember. As is that we're not 40k or Age of Sigmar, and there will be periods of quiet. We're not going to get something every month. I think something every quarter is maybe what we can hope for. And if we look back, we've had that. There's been a couple of gaps, and not all of those maybe have been planned. There might have been some problems with production or reasons for it. But we've had something, I'm sure, that averages out more than every quarter. If we've had 10 faction releases, we very recently had another Cathay book and an army box. And not long before that, at the end of November, we had a Warriors of Chaos theme book and another army box, and some of that is repeating stuff that's already out, and I get that it's not covering all factions, and some factions are doing far better out of the game than others, and that's always the case with Warhammer, whatever flavour of Warhammer you've played over the years. But there's still releases, there's still things going on. The rumours are maybe a little bit less strong than they were before, and that probably relates to the fact that we've moved to an end of a cycle, and a lot of those rumours have either proved true or they've passed and something else has happened. There is still strong rumours about chaos coming at some point later this year, more chaos of the armoured flavour this time around. And for me, and I've mentioned this in other videos, it makes a lot of sense that they would back up the Marauder expansion and refresh with a refresh of knights. At the moment, people are either buying AOS knights who are a little bit chunky to fit on the basis, or very, very old miniatures. And if we're moving at some point, might not be for a few editions yet, but we're moving towards chaos war, and the chaos is the big bad in this edition of the game, which it always is, then you want a newer miniatures range. So it would make absolute sense for them to replace their standard knights and their standard mounted knights. So I'm sure that will come at some point, and if that comes this year, fantastic, and it wouldn't surprise me if that is what comes. There's also the constantly returning rumours of a starter set with Tomb Kings and Wood Elves. It always feels weird, that one. It doesn't seem to make sense, but I'm sure that they will build a narrative that goes with that if that is the case. There was a leaked box, something that was sold on eBay many months ago as well, of a different starter set or an army box for Tomb Kings, which seemed to suggest that the current starter sets would go away, which would make sense then, because that would leave Bretonnia and Tomb Kings without the same battalion boxes that every other faction has got. That hasn't materialised yet, and there could be any number of reasons for that. It could have just been held back and other things put ahead of it, other game systems as well. It also could be that it's just been sitting there in the warehouses because they've been stocking up ahead of this big 40k release, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But it could be that it's due out this summer as a bit of a lighter release, not much new stuff that's stocked up ready for when they remove the other boxes. Maybe they're running low on stock of the current starter sets, and once they've all gone, they'll release those out. So there's still a way of getting a value set of Tomb Kings to start, and I'm guessing there will be a Bretonnia one as well. So many reasons for that. That might be the case. Whether there's a starter set with Wood Elves, who knows? That rumour seems to come back to the fore and go away again. I'll just keep watching like the rest of you, and at some point we'll find out what the truth is for that matter. As I've touched on a lot, it's a 40k release year. That will have a huge impact on all game systems that aren't 40k, and the smaller the game system, the more they tend to get pushed out and will have less time in the limelight. Some of that's marketing, a lot of that's marketing, but some of it's production as well. A few years ago, people will remember, if you were playing the game then, that plastic production was a problem because of their factory. They just couldn't keep up with demand, or their biggest stress on demand is always a Warhammer 40k release. So last time they released an edition, stuff was out of stock across the website, lots of different things from different game systems, because they just couldn't keep up with making all the toys for us. And it may well be the same this year. Hopefully they have been planning further and further ahead for that, but it will affect other releases, and there might be stuff waiting to go for Warhammer the Old World and other game systems that's just waiting for its release slot. A little bit like planes waiting for their touchdown time or their push off time to go and take off. It's just one of those things that we're going to have to accept. So 40k summer, yeah, we probably have to accept that we're not going to see an awful lot of other games during a good 2-3 month period. The message from me and the way I feel is that we have to just be a little bit patient now. We've had an awful lot of stuff in the last year and a quarter that it's felt a couple of times like there was a break. But when you look back on it now, we've had so much stuff, some of it all jumbled together, all very quick after each other. And we just need to digest that more now. If you're a competitive player and you play a lot of events, then you probably enjoy the constant sort of new injections of stuff to the meta, and FAQs do that as well. And I get that. You might not get that for a few months now, and that's quite often where some of the noise comes from of problems, because people solve the game. If you're a clever or a person than me with the game and you can write army lists and everything seems to be the same at the events you go to, I get it, but I think they've given us an awful lot to play with, and we should maybe be a little bit more 2010 and a little bit less 2026 when it comes to our patience of what we want in our games. We've got a lot. We've got lots of armies we can paint and play and enjoy games for, and that's definitely what I'm going to be doing, using the time, if there is a gap, to paint some of the armies that I haven't got around to yet, finish off projects, paint some different things, start a new project while I'm waiting. And Skaven's going to be one of those things. Try a legacy army if you've not done one before, especially if you can get hold of the miniatures from Games Workshop. It could be a really good time to do something like that and enjoy it. And of course, as I say all of this, Games Workshop are incredibly well known for releasing stuff out of previews. If they only release the stuff they announced at previews, there would only be half the amount of games and miniatures that they put out. So we could get to tomorrow or Monday and there'll be a big article on Warcom that announces the next Arcane Journal, the next thing, maybe even a new edition of the game. I don't think quite this close, but I also really wouldn't be surprised if the next fortnight we get something, a hint of a new miniature or something that's coming up to keep us excited. So I do think we will get something between now and when all the excitement for Warhammer 40k dies down. So thank you very much for watching. Stay positive. Don't get drawn into any of the negativity around the game being dead because we've not seen a new miniature for 3 weeks. Don't worry about any of that kind of stuff. Start a new project, join a narrative campaign, paint a new army, finish off projects that you've started and haven't finished. If you're a competitive player, it's a little bit more difficult and you want a new challenge for the meta. Well, we've still got very recent changes. It's only January that we had the last FAQ. I don't think the game's quite solved yet. You've got independent comps coming out at the moment, some with independent versions of the legacy armies with the Renegades list. I'm sure that's going to mix up a lot of metas that are using those kind of armies at their events. So find an event that's running one of those and run an army for one of those factions there. There are lots of ways of changing up the competitive meta if you like that kind of gaming as well. So I think there's something for all flavours of gamer out there. If Games Workshop don't release anything for 6 months or more, it will be a shame, and I don't think that will be the case, but also we've got a lot of game to be playing. So if you enjoyed this video, do go and check out the other videos on the channel. Loads and loads of Warhammer the Old World stuff. Not all me talking like this, though I do have a few opinion pieces like that, including most recently the one on the legacy factions. So do go and check that out. I mentioned it earlier, but there's loads of hobby on there as well. Loads of reviews, but loads of painting and modelling things as well, and lots of other game systems. So do go and check it all out. Subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, drop a comment below with your own thoughts. Is there anything you liked to the preview? I'd love to hear all about it. If you'd like to support me and the channel even further, then please do check out my Patreon. There's loads of different tiers on there, including discounts for buying annual memberships. It's always a nice way of supporting me and helping me keep making videos like this. Check out the channel sponsor as well, Counterattack Bases. They make loads of great old world counters and gaming aids. They make custom dice as well. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.